The day my wife took our newborn outside for the first time was supposed to be peaceful. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the neighborhood feels frozen in time. Birds chirped softly, the sun sat low and warm, and my wife cradled our baby close, moving slowly down the sidewalk like every step mattered. It was a moment we had waited weeks for. I stood on the porch, watching carefully. Not because I was paranoid, but because I had learned that peace attracts the wrong kind of attention. Especially in neighborhoods with people who confuse control with authority. That's when she appeared. HOA Karen. She came marching down the sidewalk with purpose, clipboard tucked under her arm, sunglasses pushed up like a crown. She had that look, the one that said rules mattered more to her than people. I'd seen her harass neighbors over trash bins, lawn edges, even how long someone parked in their own driveway. But this time felt different. She stopped directly in front of my wife. No greeting. No hesitation. Just a sharp inhale and a tone soaked in entitlement. "You can't have that baby out here," she said flatly. My wife blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" Karen leaned in slightly, eyes locked on the bundle in my wife's arms. "This neighborhood has regulations. Newborns attract attention. Liability issues. Noise complaints. I'm going to need you to hand the baby to me while I document the situation." For a split second, everything stopped. My wife instinctively tightened her hold, her body turning sideways to shield our child. Her voice stayed calm, but I could hear the fear underneath it. "You are not touching my baby." Karen scoffed. "Ma'am, I'm authorized. If you refuse, this can escalate." That word, escalate, hit like a switch. I stepped off the porch. Slowly. Deliberately. Each step measured. Years of training had taught me how to move without urgency while still owning the space around me. Karen didn't notice at first. Her focus was entirely on exerting control over someone she thought was vulnerable. I stopped a few feet away and spoke calmly. "Is there a problem?" Karen spun around, annoyed. "Yes. Your wife is violating HOA standards. I'm resolving it." My wife didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on our baby, breathing steadily. She trusted me to handle what came next. I looked at Karen, really looked at her. The posture, the tone, the assumption that power existed simply because she believed it did. I'd seen this behavior before, overseas, stateside, in places where people overreached because no one stopped them. "You're demanding my wife hand over our newborn," I said evenly. Karen lifted her chin. "If that's what it takes." That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was entitlement unchecked. And she had no idea who she was standing in front of. I took one more step forward, my voice low and controlled. "You're done here." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You don't get to decide that." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly how this situation would end. And in the next moments, Karen was about to learn a lesson that training, discipline, and accountability tend to teach very efficiently. The laughter died on Karen's face the moment she realized I wasn't backing down. She straightened, clearly expecting me to argue, maybe raise my voice, maybe get emotional. Instead, I stayed calm. That calm unsettled her. People like Karen thrive on reactions, on flustered responses they can twist into authority. Silence and certainty make them nervous. She took a half step closer to my wife, as if to test me. "Sir, you're interfering with an HOA enforcement," she said loudly, making sure nearby neighbors could hear. "If you continue, I will have no choice but to involve authorities." That was the second line she crossed. I moved between her and my wife without touching her, just placing myself squarely in the space she no longer controlled. My presence wasn't aggressive, but it was immovable. Years of training had taught me how to claim ground without force. "You are threatening my family," I said evenly. "You'll step back. Now." Karen scoffed again, but her confidence wavered. She glanced around and noticed curtains shifting, doors cracking open. Attention was gathering. That wasn't part of her plan. She thrived in private intimidation, not public scrutiny. "I'm calling this in," she snapped, pulling out her phone. "You people always regret pushing back." My wife said nothing. She rocked our baby gently, steady and protective, trusting me completely. That trust mattered more to me than Karen's theatrics ever could. Karen turned her back to us and started dialing, loudly describing an imaginary situation. Yes, I need assistance. There's a hostile resident refusing compliance. I fear for community safety. I let her finish. Then I spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. You are not law enforcement. You have no authority to remove a child from a parent. What you're doing is harassment. She spun around. You don't know the rules. I know the law, I replied. That stopped her cold. For a brief moment, she studied my face, searching for weakness, bluff, hesitation. She didn't find it. What she found instead was something she couldn't bully or out-talk. Who do you think you are? She demanded. I took a slow breath. Someone who's dealt with people who confuse power with permission. Karen laughed again, but it sounded thin. She raised her phone.
Fine.
Let's see what happens when real consequences show up. I nodded. Good. That single word rattled her more than shouting ever would have. As we waited, she paced, muttering about rules, violations, consequences. Each sentence was designed to intimidate, but each one only exposed how little control she actually had. Neighbors began stepping closer now, openly watching. Phones appeared. Conversations started quietly behind us. Minutes later, a patrol car turned onto the street. Karen's posture changed instantly. Relief flashed across her face, quickly followed by smug satisfaction. She pointed at us before the car even stopped. That's them, she said loudly. They're the problem. The officer stepped out calmly, surveying the scene. He took in my wife holding our newborn, the cluster of neighbors, Karen vibrating with indignation. Ma'am, he said, what seems to be the issue? Karen launched into her story, embellishing every detail. As she spoke, the officer's eyes flicked briefly to me. Recognition registered instantly.
His tone changed.
Sir, he said respectfully. Good morning. Karen froze. In that instant, everything she believed about control, authority, and intimidation began to collapse. The silence that followed was heavy, undeniable, and final, settling over the sidewalk as reality caught up with her assumptions, signaling that the situation was no longer hers to command or escape or control in any way whatsoever. Karen's face drained of color when the officer greeted me by name. The shift was immediate and unmistakable. Her shoulders stiffened, her mouth opened slightly, then closed again as if her brain was scrambling to rewrite reality fast enough to save her. She laughed nervously. You know him? The officer didn't answer her right away. Instead, he finished his quick assessment of the scene, my wife holding our newborn, neighbors watching closely, phones still recording, Karen clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. Only then did he turn back to her. Ma'am, he said evenly, I'm going to need you to step back and lower your voice. Karen bristled. I called you. I'm the one enforcing the rules here. The officer raised an eyebrow. What rules would those be? She hesitated. That hesitation was loud. HOA regulations, she said, weaker this time. She was non-compliant. The officer glanced at my wife, then at our baby, bundled tightly and sleeping peacefully. Non-compliant with what, exactly? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. No answer came out, because there wasn't one that didn't sound unhinged when spoken out loud. I finally spoke.
Calm.
Controlled. She demanded my wife hand over our newborn. Claimed authority. Threatened escalation. Karen spun toward me. That's not what happened. Several neighbors spoke up at once. It is. We recorded it. She said it herself. The officer held up a hand. Enough. He turned back to Karen. Ma'am, do you understand how serious that accusation is? She swallowed hard. I was just trying to prevent a situation. By taking a baby? The officer asked flatly. Silence again. He asked for identification. Karen fumbled through her purse, hands shaking now. The confidence she'd marched in with was completely gone, replaced by panic masked as indignation. As the officer reviewed her ID, another patrol car arrived. The second officer stepped out, scanned the crowd, then looked at me and nodded slightly. Karen noticed. That tiny exchange broke something in her. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, voice cracking. "He's intimidating me." The officer didn't even look up from his notepad. "Ma'am, no one here is being intimidated but you." Karen's breathing quickened. She started talking faster, louder, contradicting herself with every sentence. Each word dug the hole deeper. She accused. She deflected. She blamed. Finally, the officer closed his notebook. "Ma'am, you're being detained for harassment and for falsely representing authority." Her eyes widened. "Detained? You can't do that." "Yes, we can," he replied calmly. She turned toward me, desperation replacing arrogance. "Tell him to stop. This is getting out of hand." I looked at her steadily. "You made it out of hand the moment you involved my child." The officer asked her to place her hands behind her back. She hesitated, then complied, tears forming but never falling. Neighbors murmured quietly. No one looked surprised. Many looked relieved. My wife shifted slightly, adjusting our baby, who slept through the entire thing. I reached out and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. That small moment mattered more to me than anything happening around us. Karen was guided toward the patrol car. She tried one last time. "This isn't over," she said weakly. The officer paused and looked at her. "For today?" "Yes, it is." The door closed. The sound echoed louder than it should have. As the cars pulled away, the street felt different. Lighter, like a pressure valve had finally been released. Neighbors began talking openly now, sharing stories, shaking heads, some even laughing in disbelief. I picked up my wife's dropped water bottle and handed it to her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I am now." The fallout didn't wait for the patrol cars to turn the corner. It moved fast, like a shockwave rippling through the neighborhood. Within hours, phones buzzed, group chats lit up, and doors that had stayed closed for years finally opened. People talked, openly, confidently, without the hushed tones that fear enforces. By noon, the HOA board was scrambling. Emails went out labeled urgent, then please read, then emergency meeting tonight. The language was vague, carefully sanitized, as if words alone could erase what dozens of people had witnessed with their own eyes. No one bought it. The video clips were already circulating. Different angles, different phones. Same reality. Karen's name wasn't mentioned at first. That silence said everything. Neighbors stopped me as I walked back inside. Not to pry, most didn't even ask questions. They just nodded. Some thanked me quietly. Others admitted, almost embarrassed, that they'd dealt with her too. Threats. Intimidation. Rules that only seemed to apply when she wanted leverage. Parents, especially, looked relieved. Angry, but relieved. By evening, the HOA emergency meeting happened anyway. Attendance was higher than it had been in years. Karen's chair was empty. That, too, spoke volumes. The board tried to control the narrative. They framed it as a misunderstanding and urged residents to remain calm. That lasted exactly 3 minutes. Then someone stood up and asked why an HOA member felt empowered to demand a baby from its mother. Another asked how long the board had known about her behavior. A third asked why complaints had been ignored for years. No one had good answers. The board president attempted to pivot, talked about bylaws, decorum, policy review. It didn't work. Once fear evaporates, accountability rushes in to fill the space. Motions were made. Votes were called. Karen was suspended immediately, pending investigation. 2 board members resigned on the spot. The next day, official notices went out. Karen was barred from any HOA activity. A review committee was formed. Legal counsel was retained. The tone shifted from authority to damage control overnight. Meanwhile, the neighborhood changed in small but meaningful ways. Parents lingered at the bus stop. Conversations stretched longer. Kids laughed louder. Someone brought coffee. Another brought donuts. What had once felt like contested territory became communal again. My wife noticed it too. "It feels different," she said as we walked together with our baby later that afternoon. Like people aren't bracing anymore. She was right. Karen's actions didn't just expose her. They exposed a system that had relied on silence and intimidation to function. And once that system cracked, it couldn't be put back together the same way. A few days later, the formal charges were filed. Harassment. False representation of authority. The legal process moved forward quietly but firmly. There were no theatrics. No special treatment. Just procedure, documentation, and consequences. The HOA tried one last email. An apology. Carefully worded. Non-admissive. It satisfied no one. Residents were already drafting petitions. Some wanted the HOA dissolved entirely. Others wanted full reform. Either way, no one wanted a return to the old normal. And through it all, my family stayed centered. That mattered most. Our baby slept peacefully. My wife felt safe again. That sense of safety, real safety, not the illusion of control, was the thing Karen had tried to steal and utterly failed to touch. The neighborhood had crossed a threshold. There was no going back. The final consequences didn't arrive with drama. They arrived with paperwork, court dates, and silence, exactly the way accountability usually does. Karen's name stopped appearing on HOA emails altogether. Her access to internal systems was revoked. Her role, once wielded like a weapon, evaporated quietly. Court proceedings moved forward without delay. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple recordings, witness statements, and her own contradictory claims. There was no room for spin. No room for excuses. The judge didn't need theatrics to see what had happened. A line had been crossed, one that involved a family, a mother, and a newborn. Karen accepted a plea. Mandatory counseling. Community service. A restraining order that ensured she would never come within a set distance of my family again. The courtroom was calm when it was read aloud. The kind of calm that follows certainty. Outside the courthouse, there were no reporters. No spectacle. Just consequences. Back in the neighborhood, the HOA continued to unravel. The review committee published its findings, and they were blunt. Years of unchecked behavior. Complaints dismissed. Authority blurred into intimidation. The board voted to dissolve itself and turn control over to a resident-led committee with transparent oversight. What remained of the HOA was stripped down to basics, maintenance, not enforcement. Life changed in small, powerful ways. Parents chatted freely at the bus stop. Children ran ahead on sidewalks without glancing over their shoulders. Neighbors waved instead of watching. The unspoken tension that had shaped daily routines simply disappeared. One afternoon, as I walked with my wife and our baby, someone stopped us. A woman I barely knew. She thanked us, not for what happened, but for what it revealed. We didn't realize how bad it had gotten until it stopped, she said. That stuck with me. Karen never returned to the role she once clung to. Her influence was gone. Her reputation followed her quietly wherever she went. Not because people gossiped, but because actions leave trails and accountability has a long memory. Our family settled back into routine. Feedings. Walks. Sleepless nights, softened by laughter. The moment Karen tried to control never became trauma. It became a boundary reinforced. The lesson spread further than our street. Group chats changed tone. Other neighborhoods asked questions. People learned that authority doesn't come from titles or clipboards. It comes from responsibility, restraint, and respect. And perhaps most importantly, they learned that when someone crosses the ultimate line, when they mistake entitlement for power, standing firm doesn't require shouting or threats. It requires calm, clarity, and the courage to say no. Karen thought she was enforcing rules. What she actually did was remind an entire community of its rights. And that lesson didn't fade.